Hey everybody, thanks for checking out the channel again. This is the 9th installment in my complete analysis of all 389 Bach chorale harmonizations. We're going to be looking at Dich, Mein schwacher Geist today. That roughly translates to Take courage, my weak spirit. That being said, there's one really beautiful chord change moment that I'll point out when we get there, but other than that, it's been a pretty straightforward chorale to analyze. Not too much disagreement in my own analysis when I went back and looked at it, and that's all I really had to say, so let's get started. 1 sharp in the key signature, G, G. We're in the key of G major pretty clearly here. If we look ahead to our first cadence, we're cadencing in a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major, so there's some modulation that happens between the beginning and the first cadence, so not too late after the beginning of the piece we get a modulation, which is kind of interesting. We start with a G major triad, then we have an E minor triad, E, B, E, G. It's a 6 chord, and then we get D, C, F sharp, A. It's a 5-7 chord where the 7 is suspended and then goes up to an 8. That's interesting. And then we have a 1 chord, so a 1-6-5-1 progression. And I think this is where we get the modulation to D major, right here, because we get C sharps immediately afterwards. So that 1 would be turning into a 4, because G is the subdominant in the key of D major. And then on this weak beat, we have a 5-4-2 going on. It's an A7 chord over the 7th, A7 over G. Then we have F sharp A, F sharp D, just a 1 chord in first inversion. Then we have A, E, D. I think this is an accented non-chord tone, so A, F sharp D would be a 1-6-4, or more specifically we could just say 6-4 because it's coming from a 1 chord already. Then we have A, G, C sharp. It's a 5-7 chord, and sometimes analysts use this bracket notation to signify they're related to one another. And then we get a 1 chord. And I think this is actually where we get the modulation back to G as well, where this is now the 5 of the chord. So how do we explain this D sharp then if we're modulating back to G major? Well, D sharp is the leading tone for E, and E is the relative minor to G, so it's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's the only one that happens in proximity to the next cadence, which is a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major. That being said, this is a B7, it's just a B chord. I guess you could call it a B7 if you take into account this A right here, but I've been marking those as passing tones, so I'm just going to call this 5-6 of 6, and this is the beautiful moment. Instead of going to E minor, which is where you would expect it to go because 6 is E minor, it goes to 4-6. It goes to C major. 4 and C major and E minor share 2 tones in common, and if you think in terms of E minor, that's like the equivalent of the dominant B going to 6, so like 5-6 in E minor, which is really fascinating. It's a really beautiful moment, and it's my favorite moment in the chorale. We have some passing tones here. G, B, D, G, so 4-6 to 1. Then we get C, C, E, B. I guess you could kind of call that like a 4-7 that's happening very briefly. I'll just put that in parentheses. I'm not 100% sure as to whether or not that's actually happening, but it is preparing for a D, F sharp, A, C, which is a D7 triad over the 7th. It's a 5-4-2. Passing tone right here to A, D, G, B. I think that's an accented non-chord tone because we get a G on the next beat. G, D, G, B. That's just a root position 1 chord. And then we get ready for our cadence. D, D, G. And then that's like a 4-3 suspension. This is just a big 5. Turns into a 7 right here when we get the 7th as a passing tone. A big 5-1 cadence. A perfect authentic cadence. Okay, so let's get ready for the next cadence, where we get right here, we cadence on, it's a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. So we will see how that happens and where we say the modulation occurs. So we start off with a 5 chord, that's just a D major triad. some passing tones in the middle voices, the inner voices rather, and then we get D, F sharp, A. It's just again, just another 5 chord, just the bass leaps up an octave and the upper voices rotate. Some more passing tones. Then we get B, D, B, G sharp. That's 7, 6 of 2, because G sharp is the leading tone of A. So I think this is where the modulation is occurring right here, because that would be a common tone. I think it would make more sense for it to happen on the diminished chord than it would on the major 4, because D would be the subdominant of A. And unless there was some reason for me to believe that there was like some melodic minor going on, that would more likely be a D minor than a D major. But that 7 chord goes immediately to an A minor, A, E, A, C, a neighbor tone in the alto because it goes back up. And then we get D sharp, F sharp, A, C. That is 7, 7, like a fully diminished triad of 5, because E is the dominant of A. And then we would expect that to go to 5, which I think it does. We have some counterpoint and some suspensions going on, kind of similar to what was happening here. So we're just going to call this 5, and it turns into a 7 on this beat right here, and it cadences on 1. Nice. Everything's pretty straightforward so far. So let's look ahead to the next cadence. My analysis is crowding the fermata, so I'm going to write perfect authentic cadence right underneath it, and this is in the key of E minor. And we immediately get a D sharp and a G natural on the next beat. So I'm going to say that this A minor is going to serve as a common chord, and it is now the 4 of the key. Kind of like how G modulated to D and it became the 4, A is modulating to E and it is becoming the 4. So it goes to an E minor triad, so another 1. And I'm going to reanalyze the 1 here because the 1 on this beat is an A minor and the 1 on this beat is an E minor. So that's the time, that would be really the only time that I would reanalyze it on consecutive beats using the same Roman numeral. Then we have passing tones, but let's look and see. F sharp, A, D sharp, B. That's 5, 6, 5. That's just a B7 chord over the F sharp. Wait, no, that would be a 5, 4, 3, actually, for that same reason, because it's over the F sharp, not over the D sharp. Then we get G, B, E, B. That's a 1, 6 chord. Passing tone in the tenor. G sharp, B, E, B. That is an E7 chord over G sharp, so it would be a 5, 6, 5 of A minor. Interesting. So 5, 6, 5 of 4. No need to mark this because this E is part of the chord, similarly to how this D was part of the chord earlier. So I'm definitely seeing symmetry, or drawing parallels and comparing between G to D and A to E. And notice how one happens. Yeah, I'm seeing that these sections are congruous in many ways. And then we have A minor here, so it does immediately go to 4 like you would expect. We have some passing tones. And then we get A sharp, C sharp, G, E. That's a 7 fully diminished of 5. 7, 7 of 5. And we would expect that to go to 5. So B, F sharp, E, or B. I think this is an accented non-chord tone right here. It's this is actually a 1, 6, 4, getting ready for a 5, 7, and then cadencing on 1. And we use this bracket notation sometimes to signify that 1, 6, 4, and 5 are paired together often in cadential situations. Alright, so next, let's move on. Our next cadence right here, you might be tempted to call it an imperfect authentic cadence in D major because of the C sharps, but the way that I hear it, I hear this cadence as a half cadence in G major. This is functioning as a dominant in preparation for the last cadence, which is a perfect authentic cadence in G major. So I think we stay in G major for the entire last leg of the chorale. And I think our analysis will prove that to be valid in terms of calling it that way. So we're going to say that this E minor is our common chord. We're back in the key of G major after this. This would be a 6 chord then, if we reanalyze E minor in the context of G major. Then we have D, D, A, F sharp. That would be 5. You could call this 4-2 if we were analyzing passing tones as new chords, but I'm not going to do that. Then we have B, D, G, G. That is a 1-6 chord in the key of G major. Then we have G, G, B, G. That's just 5-3, because all that's happening is the bass is changing. Whatever happens in the upper voices, I don't really care too much about if the chord is still the same regarding the notes that are involved. Not particularly the exact, like, pitch classes themselves, but the notes themselves. Like, this is still a G major triad for all intents and purposes, right? So no need to re-evaluate the chord. We can't, Roman numerals and figured bass aren't that specific. E, G, C, B. I think we're going to call that a 4 chord in first inversion, and it's a 7 chord, so it'd be a 4-6-5. I think we have some passing tones here. F sharp, A, C. We could actually kind of call this a passing 7. Because that'll just go to G, B, and then this is sort of like a accented, well, it's a suspension, right? It's like a 2-1 or a 9-8 suspension, right? And that goes to 1. And then the E and the G and the B and the B, even though these are kind of like anticipations, we can kind of say that that's 6. Then we have C sharp, A, G, and E. That's 5-6-5, 5. Some passing tones going on. Turns into 7-5-3 right here, and then cadences on 5. So one might be tempted to say that this is a very sudden, well, not sudden, a very quick modulation to D, and that it's actually an imperfect authentic cadence. And I had to listen to the cadence a couple of times, but really it feels like this F sharp wants to go up to G. That's what I hear. So that's the way that I analyzed it, and I'm just going to stay consistent for the sake of analysis. And then we go to a 1-6 chord. This is just a G major triad in first inversion. Then we have a 4 chord with sort of this 9-8 suspension going on right here. The D going down to the C. Then we have D, C, F sharp, D. That is a 5-7 chord. Another passing tone on the tenor. A very active tenor line. Bach loved to write active tenor lines, which is really cool. Then we have E, B, G, C. Another 4 chord with the E in the bass, and it's a 7 chord, so another 4-6-5, which is interesting. F sharp, A, C. That's another kind of like a passing 7 chord. And then we have G, D, B. That is a 1 chord, as we would expect 7 to go. 2. It's kind of like an escape tone, I believe that's what it's called. It's a non-chord tone that leaps afterwards. And then we get some counterpoint going on in the tenor to continue that activity, but still it's very clearly a 4 chord. D, F sharp, D, C. 5-7. And then we end on a 1. That was a really fun chorale to analyze. It was straightforward. Lots of activity in the tenor line. Being a tenor myself, I like seeing that, because the part's funner to sing, or more fun to sing. And other than that, really right here, the big takeaway for me was that, wow, 5 of 6 can go to 4. That's like the equivalent of going to, it's like an equivalent of like a deceptive cadence, or 5 going to 6 in your current key, which is really interesting. I'm going to be looking for that, and I won't be as hesitant to analyze it that way if I was to see this again in the future in another chorale, which I would hedge my bets and say that I would likely see it again in another chorale. But that being said, we explore a lot of different keys in this very chromatically dense chorale. It was fun to analyze. Let me know if there's anything else that I missed or anything that you noticed and wanted to share in the comment section. Thanks a lot, everyone. Happy New Year. Take care.